just to close our interview, what can you tell us a little bit about your trajectory, your upbringing and your intellectual trajectory? So the question would be, how this little boy from Colombia end up being one of the leading thinkers in our time?
Well, I'm not sure I'm a leading thinker of our time. I'm just someone who's trying to make sense of the experience of Latinos in the United States and perhaps contribute to some intellectual agendas that might perhaps become political agendas. So I was born in Colombia, and essentially I grew up being raised by different families while my mother emigrated to the United States. She was able to bring us here when I was almost 14, after she was able to get her papers and was able to petition us. But already from very young, I was interested. I was a bookworm. I was always had my nose in books, and I was interested in questions of social justice. I grew up in many different cities in Colombia, and I saw the tremendous injustices. This was also the time when we had the Nicaraguan Revolution, what was happening in El Salvador, and I was sympathetic, and I had a sense that this was a historic moment. But when I came to the United States, I was interested in pursuing studies in the humanities and in the sciences. And eventually I got a degree in philosophy and math. From there I had discovered liberation theology, liberation thinking, and I wanted to understand better this tradition because I understood that it is one of the great intellectual contributions of Latin America to humanity. It was a movement, it was an ideal, it is an ideal, but it is also an intellectual tradition. And I was interested in all of these things, but in particular in being able to learn about its principles. And so I ended up going to Union Theological Seminary, which at the time, and it is to this day, remains one of the few schools in the United States where you can actually specialize in the study of liberation theology. There I had some wonderful experiences. I was very fortunate to meet Enrique Dussel, who was giving a seminar, and we became friends and have remained friends since then. This is one of the ways in which I got to translate him and study him and write on him. Mm-hmm. I got to work with James Cone, a black liberation theologian. I was very, very honored to have been accepted by him to be one of his students. He taught me something very important, something that guides my pedagogical vocation. It has to do with that you should work in developing the resources that are significant to your community. And so that has guided me. I do work on Latin American philosophy. I do work now on Latino philosophy. I do work on African American philosophy, because I think that we have to pay attention to the resources that our communities have fashioned and that provide vocabularies that are, native tongues, vernaculars to these communities. So from there, I went on to pursue my PhD in philosophy, which took me to Germany, where I was able to work with Jürgen Habermas, a very important German and European philosopher. And since I got my PhD, I've been kind of working to two sides of the border, thinking of Latinos and Latin Americans in the United States, and then Latin American thought from Latin America, and see how they can cross-fertilize, contribute to each other's intellectual development. So that's more or less my kind of humble story.
Great. 3 books that influenced you or that we should pay attention to.
I think that a book that I come back to almost every 6 months is Plato's Republic. I just find that book immensely rich In fact, I was like 2 nights ago rereading it in a new translation, and I have some new insights. So I think that book should be read by everyone, because it's the fountainhead of Western ethics, Western political philosophy, Western metaphysics, etc. You can find it there. I think another book has been very decisive for me was Enrique Dussell's Ethics of Liberation. And I think that book is extremely important because it's one of the few books that gives you, on the one hand, a history of global ethics, of ethics across the world, in an incredibly ecumenical and fair way. It's about understanding the contributions that different ethical systems have given. Mm-hmm. And then, and the second half, an elaboration of the principles of an ethics of liberation. I just find that book extremely important. And a book that is fairly recent, about 15 years, and this is The Racial Contract by Charles Mills, which I think is a brilliant text in terms of making sense of the ways in which philosophy, but also political philosophy, contributes to the perpetuations of racist systems. And what is interesting, at least in my case, is that now whenever I teach Introduction to Political Philosophy, I begin with Plato and I end with Charles Mills, The Racial Contract. I think that as a philosopher, those are important texts for me that I find to this day inspirational, and I would want to always have them close by.
Eduardo Mendieta, thank you very much for this interview. I'm very thankful for your time.
Claudio, thank you so much.
Thank you.